Hello everybody, Father Ed Kornath here. I wanted to do a little segment of Faith at Home. This last Sunday I gave a homily about forgiveness, and I just want to give a little recap of that homily for those who did not hear it. I remember it very well. 19 years ago, September 11th, it was a Tuesday morning, and I was celebrating the 8 a.m. Mass where I was stationed at St. Thomas Aquinas Parish in Waterford. During that 8 a.m. Mass, during the petitions, and in those days we used to open up the petitions to the daily congregation, small congregation, so you could do that. One lady prayed for the plane that crashed into the World Trade Center. Well, I didn't think too much about it because I remember about a month or two ago before that September 11th, so sometime in July or August or so, a small single-engine plane or a helicopter got off course and crashed into the upper stories of the Empire State Building. Certainly the poor pilot was killed, but there was not much damage to those big buildings. And so that's what I thought. Another single-engine plane, pilot got confused and crashed into the big building. But when I entered the parish office, the secretary said that, the United States was under attack. So we gathered the staff together. We all went to the next room. We watched the television. And we were looking at the television news from New York from about 9 in the morning all the way till the parish office closed at 5 in the afternoon. That day the office was eerily quiet. And throughout the course of watching that, we saw the second plane crash into the World Trade Center. We heard about the plane that crashed into the Pentagon, the other plane that crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. That plane was on its way to crash into the Capitol building, but some brave parishioners stood up and overpowered the terrorists, and the plane crashed. And then we saw all the people just walking the streets of New York covered with ash and soot. Kind of looked like a zombie apocalypse. They all had that stunned look on their face. So it was just a horrible, horrible day. And then because of that, we all know that air flight was suspended for about a month. The NFL and the baseball league stopped playing for about a week. The restaurants closed, the movie theaters closed, and almost like we experienced back in March with the coronavirus. And again, that was 19 years ago, but it seems so fresh in at least my memory, I'm sure in your memory too. Then eventually I was transferred from Waterford to Kewaskum, and then 9/11 became very personal there because one of the village residents died in the World Trade Center. She was only about 24 years old, just graduated from college. Her name was Andrea Haberman, and Miss Haberman, her business sent her to New York that day, and she was in the morning in the World Trade Center, and she perished in the destruction there. That's why in Kewaskum, Wisconsin, there's an I-beam from the World Trade Center, and that will be the site of the Wisconsin 9/11 memorial. So once I got to Kewaskum, it was very personal because one of the villagers died there. I don't know if anybody from Brookfield died in the World Trade Center, but certainly one did from Kewaskum. And then what happened is we were all filled with such anger, almost bordering on hatred. I know that was for me. I could have grabbed one of those terrorists and just killed him with my own bare hands. I was so angry that those innocent people died. I was so angry that our country was under attack. But then we heard in the first reading on Sunday this: wrath and anger are hateful things, yet the sinner hugs them tight. Forgive your neighbor's injustice, and then when you pray, your own sins will be forgiven. Reminds us of the Our Father: forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Challenging words of Jesus. It's not always easy to forgive, especially horrible, horrible things like 9/11, where the terrorists just like that kill over 2,900 people. Or people who are sexually abused, especially children, the pedophiles out there, especially when that's done by a clergyman. Just the hurt and destruction that happens to a person's psyche and soul, not to mention the rage of the families when something like that happens. How do you forgive something like that? Well, really, I don't know. I guess we just have to pray for that. Or if you have a friend or relative that's robbed and murdered during that robbery, somebody just snuffs out somebody's life just in an instant. I don't know how we even forgive or move forward from that. But while we might not have to deal with murderers in our lives, we all do have grudges against one another. And a grudge becomes like toxic waste. It eats away at you and me. It does nothing to the person that we're holding the grudge against. I was once at an open AA meeting, and the speaker said that when you have a grudge, what happens is you give that person that you have the grudge against free rent space in your mind. You think about it, you lose sleep, while the other person goes out there, free and, footloose and fancy-free. And so at least we can ask the Lord to get that toxic waste, the grudges, out of ourselves. That noisy neighbor that you have up to here, or the worker who steals your idea and takes credit for it, or a family member who rips you off or takes advantage of you. So maybe in those ways we can ask the Lord to help us to forgive. Again, just 3 little vignettes about people who have forgiven in amazing and powerful ways. In the early 1990s, a crazed gunman entered an Amish school. I forgot if that was in Iowa or Missouri or Pennsylvania. But anyway, the shooter killed 5 of the children, and then the shooter turned the gun on himself. Well, the Amish people showed compassion even to the mother and father of the shooter. They visited the shooter's parents, brought them food, and consoled them. The Amish even went to the shooter's funeral. The Amish community was able to show marvelous forgiveness. Or back in 1982, I believe it was, I was in a seminary at that time, when Pope John Paul II was greeting the crowds in the plaza of St. Peter's Basilica. He was there on his Pope Mobile, and a man from Turkey, Muhammad Allah Aga, pointed a revolver at the Pope and squeezed the trigger some 3, 4, or 5 times. Pope John Paul came within a breath of dying, but God spared his life. As a matter of fact, Pope John Paul attributed it to Mary, because John Paul was shot on May 13th, which is the feast of Our Lady of Fatima. After John Paul's convalescence, he met his assassin. His assassin was obviously in an Italian prison. So John Paul went into his cell, and they sat there knee to knee, face to face. And Pope John Paul forgave that young man for trying to kill him. One last story, a man by the name of Bud Welch was filled with rage because his daughter Julie was killed in the Oklahoma City bombing. That too was somewhere in the early 1990s. The Murrah Federal Building, Oklahoma City. Timothy McVeigh was the bomber. And Mr. Welch could have taken Timothy McVeigh and ripped him limb from limb with his bare hands. And for a long time, Mr. Welch was filled with anger. Eventually, Bud Welch made contact with Timothy McVeigh's father. And the day came when both of them sat down in a kitchen in New York City. And Mr. McVeigh asked for forgiveness, and Mr. Welch gave the forgiveness. And Mr. Welch consoled Mr. McVeigh over the heinous crime of his son Timothy. And then Mr. Welch tried to save Timothy McVeigh from capital punishment. I think McVeigh was sentenced either to the electric chair or to a lethal injection. So amazing that Mr. Welch was trying to get Timothy McVeigh's sentence to just be life in prison rather than the death penalty. Because Mr. Welch said, how will Timothy McVeigh's death, how will his execution help to heal me? And eventually Bud Welch founded a group, a foundation called something like Freedom from Violence, and they work for victims' rights, and so he did some good things with his forgiveness. So Jesus, hanging from the cross, says, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. It might be difficult for us to forgive in large ways, but at least in those little grudges that we hold, we can ask God's grace to forgive. You know, when you cut your finger, that takes a couple of days to heal. You break a bone, that takes a little longer to heal. But when we're hurt in our hearts, in our relationships, that takes a heck of a long time to heal. But nonetheless, Jesus is the healer. Let us ask him to forgive us, as he always does, and that we too would mirror that forgiveness to our sisters and brothers around us. Thank you, and God bless you.